So this is the colloquial preterite. And what I'm going to be doing here is talking to you about the colloquial preterite. And don't be afraid of the term. Colloquial simply means informal, and preterite simply means past. So it's an informal use for past. And this is something that I researched over a period of a few years when I was a doctoral student at Teachers College. So let's take a look. We're going to start with a subjective reaction test. So see if you think these are correct or incorrect. Just make a little note. Which ones are correct, which ones are not correct. Okay? Make a little note. That's it. Okay. So let's take a look. If we want to analyze this, this is the present perfect. Have returned. Okay? And actually, number 3 is the present perfect, but it's contracted. So these are fine. This is the present perfect. Here, we're actually using come, which is the past participle of come, came, come. So came would be the past tense. So I just come back as a participle. It needs a word inserted here, which would be have. I've just come back. So this one is a stigmatized form. It is not correct. But what about I just came back? There's came, simple past. It's actually okay. That's the colloquial preterite. I'm going to mark it right here. Okay, now try the next one. I did it already. I've done it already. I've done it already. I've already completed it. Now this time, which one is not correct? Where's the stigmatized form? Which one or ones do you find the present perfect, and where is the colloquial preterite? See if you can identify them. So here we have the complete present perfect. Number 2, we've got the contracted present perfect. Here we have the dropped auxiliary again, where you need have to make it correct. And here is our colloquial preterite. I did. Past tense. How are you doing? Okay? So number 1 is actually correct, but some people think it's wrong. Number 3 is stigmatized, and the other 2 are the perfect. Here we go again. Now you should be able to do this one fairly easily. If you find the stigmatized form and the colloquial preterite and then the present perfect, you should be fine. So here we have 2 present perfects. They're both the contracted form. Then we have our stigmatized form, ain't, and here is our colloquial preterite. So now you see what the colloquial preterite is. One more. I never seen anything like it. I never saw anything like it. I've never seen anything quite like that. I've never seen anything like it. Okay, so what have we got there? Well, you should see the present perfect, the full form, and the contracted form. Okay, here we go. Have, never seen. Notice the word never is in the middle there. But have seen is the verb. The seen is the verb with never in the middle. We have the contracted form right there. Those are our present perfects. All right, present perfect. And our dropped auxiliary, we dropped the auxiliary have. Or it could be apostrophe VE, but it's dropped. We need an auxiliary because this is the past participle, seen. Okay, so I'm going to just write this so you remember what this is. It's called the dropped auxiliary. And so where's our colloquial preterite? Right here. Never saw. All right, so this is what I spent 3 years of my life studying. All right, so here's an example. When you're teaching the present perfect, have you ever studied Spanish? Yes, I've taken 2 courses, but I took 2 courses last year. So I've taken 2 courses between a point in the past and now, and when it's finished, I took 2 courses. That's one way of showing it. Another is Chuck has just returned from Seville, but he returned 3 days ago. So just tells us that it was recent. We're referring to a point in the past, but from the perspective of the present. So the present is the reference time here, and we're looking back from the present to a point in the past. But the point in the past is kind of reminding us that this is something that happened since that time. So you can see these two examples that have been used to contrast the present perfect with the simple past. And so I thought, okay, those are those two forms, I get it. But something fishy was going on. And I discovered that we could actually say, did you ever study Spanish? And we could actually say, Chuck just returned. And not, we can actually omit the perfect, and we can omit, and this would be the past instead of the participle. We can actually say, did you ever study? And Chuck just returned. And that's what I was studying, was why can we do that? So here we go. Did you ever study Spanish? Chuck just returned. This is the colloquial preterite. So now we have some more examples. Did you have lunch already? Did you have lunch yet? I live in New York, but I never saw the St. Patrick's Day parade. These are genuine examples collected in data by other researchers showing the colloquial preterite. How much is he giving you? I don't know. I didn't even see him yet. This is from the literature. They should have arrested the builder for cutting the trees down. They massacred the neighborhood. Really what they mean there is they have massacred the neighborhood as a result of the trees coming down. So Biff and Willie, maybe you'll be able to see, this is actually from Death of a Salesman, if you know that play by Arthur Miller. So there it was, colloquial preterite. All right, so based on my research, I collected a lot of data. I analyzed the present perfect as this is from Leach and Du Bois. If you look at the bottom, you can see that. And I did an analysis of the perfect. So here we have the perfect, the present perfect, analyzed by overtone, single action, continuative, and iterative are the three. So single action means one thing that happened, and there are three of them: near past, recent indefinite, and present result. So we have just, he's just sold his gas guzzler already. Have they agreed on a fair price yet? And already and yet, sorry. And then no adverb, I'm afraid she's hurt herself. All right. So the next one is continuative. You can have the general indefinite, which is a period of time. Have you ever seen anything like it? Always, ever, never. Or period up to the present, for and since, or other durative, we call durative expressions that have to do with duration. And here's an example. We've only lived here since last fall. And last is iterative, means more than once. You know, you iterate something. It's more than once, okay? Reiterate, right? It's an action that's having repeated over time in the past up to now. I've eaten there several times. I like that restaurant. Notice the present is the reference point. I like that restaurant. I'm going to tell you something about it relating to the past to the present. I've eaten there several times. And what I did in my research was I created activities that tested these three overtones to find out whether we really use the present perfect as indicated on the right-hand side of this chart, or whether there were alternatives. And I found out that in some cases we always use the perfect, and in other cases there's variation. So let's take a look. I found that we had variation for 7 adverbs. So with already and yet, we had variation. I already saw that movie. Did you stop the mail yet? For ever, never, always, we had variation. Did you ever? I never heard of it. I always had. And for just and finally. So for these 3 situations, there was variation. But what caused the variation? When did people feel that they could switch to the past tense instead of using the perfect, which was the one that they were told to use? Again, if you look back to the previous slide, we've got just, already, and yet that we could vary. Always, never, and ever that we could vary. Just and finally is missing from here. It should be here. Just found a little error in my own work. Okay. All right, so let's keep going now. All right, so this was an example from the data. I talked to an informant, and it was an activity called the nagging friend. So I said, why don't you? Like, you're moving, you're ready to go, you want to get rid of me, okay? So I'm going to keep bothering you. Why don't you go to the post office? Oh, I've already taken care of that. Well, you better tell the post office you're moving. Well, we've notified the post office. Oh, don't forget to cancel the paper. We've never had a paper delivered. And I've already notified the newspapers. These are examples, okay? So you notice on the left, we have the perfect. We have the perfect coming all the way down to here. These are all perfect. See, these are contracted, but they're perfect. There they are. And then all of a sudden, he gets angry at me, and he starts switching to the preterite. So he switched already, and all the way down with no present perfect. Okay, so I still want to continue, so I'm going to continue. I'm not sure why it looked as though it was not going to continue. So here we go. So now the next thing is to show you the percentage that I found. Now that was with already. And notice already was 35% of the time people used it instead of the present perfect. So we have, instead of present perfect, just and final. Oh, whoops. We want to do this, and we want to have the pen. I'm going to go get the pen again, and still working with my new tools. Okay, so there we found 80 to 83% for just and finally using the simple past instead of the present perfect. Never, ever, always, about half and half, you can see, about half the time. And yet and already, about 35–36% of the time they were switching. Well, why is this a problem? It's a problem because these are the adverbs that ESL teachers use. When they teach the present perfect, this is how they teach it. They teach it with these adverbs. And then the students go outside, and what do they see? They see people using the past tense with these very adverbs that they were taught to use the present perfect with. So this was my data, and you can see I did children, parents, and seniors. I did lower middle class and upper middle class. And look at the differences. Okay, you can see here in the middle class, lower middle class, 18% of the time. Just look at the N is the number of people, and standard deviation is how far apart they were from the mean. So we have 18% versus 41%. So we see the upper middle class is using the colloquial preterite much more. This is the percentage of colloquial preterites used with never. Okay, so the upper middle class is using the colloquial preterite more than the lower middle class. Why is that? Well, and then the older generation, they're using the lower middle class is using the present perfect more. Less, sorry, and using the colloquial preterite less. So, so you can see that there's something going on here that's a class difference. And what we see is that this form, the colloquial preterite, is considered not snobby to use it. And so people that are very educated, they use it anyway. They don't care. But the lower middle class, particularly the females, want to sound more educated. And so they eschew the colloquial preterite, and they use the present perfect. All right? So this was a really interesting finding, and it's with a lot of other sociolinguistic studies too. So you can identify it as a prestige form, the present perfect, used in cases where you could use the simple past. If you don't, it's because you want to sound more educated. That's what's happening. But it's a change over time because the senior citizens don't manifest that phenomenon. They use the present perfect all the time anyway. Okay. So, so here we have the analysis of what is stable and what is variable. And on the left, we have the meaning, and we have the adverbs, or in this case, no adverb. I'm afraid she's hurt. And then we have whether it's variable or stable. So you can notice that we found stable was for and since. We've only lived here since last year. And iterative is stable. I like that restaurant. I've eaten there several times. So if these are the two stable uses and the others are variable, what does that say about teaching ESL? Well, it says teach the stable uses first. So you should teach present perfect with for and since. That's the best way to teach it. The students can count on it. They can learn it. The other way you can teach it is iterative with many times, as in I've eaten there many times. The variable uses teach later with the near past with just and finally, recent indefinite with already and yet, the general indefinite past with never, ever, and always, and the present result with no adverb. Teach them later. So this is what I recommended based on my research. Okay, so what are the learner difficulties? Well, here are some things learners do. It's raining for 2 days. Well, that should be present perfect. That's the stable use, so we need to teach that. It has been raining for 2 days. That's the present perfect progressive. It's called progressive because it has ing. That makes it progressive. Instead of saying it has rained, we say it has been raining. Okay, so that's an error. And I was teaching you to put an asterisk, and then I didn't do it myself. So we should really have a little asterisk there to say it. These are errors. I have seen him yesterday. That's yesterday. So you see the adverbial phrase, this is a prepositional phrase, and this is just a plain adverb. These things have to tell you the time. So for 2 days tells you it has to be present perfect. Yesterday tells you it has to be past. So these are reversed. The have seen should be saw. Okay, he lived in that house since 1999. Well, he still lives there, so we can't say, you can say he lived in that house for many years, he lived in that house until 1999, but if it's since 1999, we need the present perfect, so that one is wrong. And I studied English for 3 years. That means you're not studying anymore. Now, that's possible, but it has a different meaning. You could be saying, I studied English for 3 years. I hated it. Now I'm studying Chinese instead, like that. But you probably mean I have studied English or I've studied English for 3 years. So these are some of the errors that you'll see students making, and now you understand why they're making them, what kind of errors they are, and what we should be doing to teach the present perfect and understand the colloquial preterite. Thank you. The end.